Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2018 sci-fi drama titled Fast Color. Now, Fast Color runs for 1 hour and 42 minutes long. It is directed by Julia Hart. It is produced by Jordan Horowitz, Mickey Lydell, and Peter Shillamon. The script was written by Julia Hart and Jordan Horowitz. It is composed by Rob Simonson, the cinematography by Michael Fimagnari, and it was edited by Martin Pensa. And the stars of the movie are Gugu Mbatha-Raw, Lorraine Toussaint, Eliza Ham, Saniyya Sidney, David Straithairn, Christopher Denham, and Levi Lobo. The year 2019 was a strange year in the movie making industry. And that's not necessarily saying that that's a bad thing because, it brought about new ideas, it brought about different perspectives, it brought a wide range of diversity in the types of variety of movies that were coming out at that time period. And it was just something for everyone, regardless of your certain particular taste of genre of your choice. In this case of Fast Color, this is a movie that's kind of like unlike any others, being the fact that the movie is practically a superhero movie, but it's just that our protagonists are not wearing funny capes, flashy clothes, and are not necessarily taking down some evil villain in some sort of plain light. In fact, these superhero type of characters are actually trying to do their best to conceal and hide their amazing gifts from the public spectrum in a rather dystopian world where things have sort of gotten a little bit dry, and also at a time when water became more of a purchasable commodity rather than just something that we have in our everyday lives. Because that's what you kind of get in this movie. And I'm saying that, and what I mean by the year 2019 was a strange year in the movie making industry, what I mean is that the trajectory in movie making is that the films that are getting the green light seem to represent irony and symbolism. When you get Jordan Peele's Us, as the symbolism is right in our faces as a wake-up call to everyone without being preachy, but instead giving us visual references to get its message across. When you get his directorial debut, Get Out, which represents racism in America and that Caucasian liberals who side with minorities, well, they're not really any better than those conservatives who oppose minorities. And while Us kind of takes a bigger slice of the pie as it goes after America as a whole, as how the rich elites expect the working underclass to treat them almost like royalty. And this time, Us is not like pointing at black and white, but actually more or less rich or poor, regardless of skin color, orientation, or religious belief or gender. They're going after the rich because the rich expect to be treated almost like royalty, and the poor has to comply or be submissive to their demanding whims. But here, Fast Color is generally a sci-fi thriller that explores that the more progressive feminism is thriving, the more men feel threatened by it that they need to destroy it. But it's also about a mother who's under the protection of her own mother to the point where she just wants to get away from her and has been absent for her and her own daughter's life for the last 8 years. There's still enough to offer for those who like stunning visual effects and for people who are more into character driven films. There's plenty of that to go around. So, under the direction of Julia Hart, whose previous films include Miss Stevens and Stargirl, the emphasis on Fast Color isn't primarily on high school students, but still focusing on issues concerning women, on how no matter how many steps they move forward, they're still being held back due to oppression and sexism. Because no matter how hard a woman is trying to bring themselves up to the podium so that they could be equal to their male counterparts, just leave it up to them to just hold them back. Could be out of fear, could be out of desperation, or is it just some kind of a ploy just to make them work even harder so that they could even go further or even surpass what men have done? That could be it. And maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing if we're going to keep trying to hold them back by getting them to work harder. So, in a way, that's not sexism. That's more like progressivism. I mean, they would do the same thing for us too. It works on both ends. But under the penmanship of Julia Hart and her husband, Jordan Horowitz, the story focuses on Ruth, played by Gugu Mbatha-Raw, who's on the run from top government officials and scientists after discovering that she has incredible superpowers. In fact, her own mother and her daughter also have unique superpowers that they use to manipulate the world. In Ruth's case, she ends up seeking refuge by returning to the place she abandoned 8 years ago. Do you know where that is? That's right. Home. That's right. She is trying to retreat back home while she's on the run from top government officials and scientists who want to do some kind of weird testings on her because apparently she's got the natural gifts to shake the ground. And I don't mean that in a word of figurative speech, like when women want to excel, they are shaking the ground. But in Ruth's case, she's actually can shake the ground. Whenever she goes into some kind of seizure of some sort, the ground shakes. Strange, but true. And so now she's on the run, and the only place she could return back to is her home. Though she's not a clean-cut protagonist, that being that she was once a drug addict and a rebel who wanted to get away from the reclusive life that was brought onto her by her mother. She tries to rectify her relationship with her daughter Leela, played by Saniyya Sidney, and her mother Bo, played by Lorraine Toussaint. With the government in hot pursuit of this gifted young lady, the time in which this film is set is in a dystopian society where it hasn't rained for the last 8 years. Water has become scarce, to the point where if you want water, it'll cost something like $50. Because, newsflash for you, you're not gonna get, it's not coming down from the skies anytime soon. Uh-uh. Her exploitation of her unusual talent caught the attention after she had a seizure, which resulted in her causing a massive earthquake in her home in New Mexico. One of the pursuers is a scientist named Bill, played by Christopher Denham, who warns Ruth that the more she runs, the more damage she's inflicting. Ruth's powers were not those of her own, but were inherited by all the ladies in her family roots. But they all have different talents that are unusual but extraordinary. Like Bo, she has the ability to crush stuff into tiny molecules, and then she has also the ability to bring things back together. I believe Leela also has the power of telekinesis, who could bend a spoon, or she can move objects through the power of her head. Oh, and also Leela also seems to be a prodigy when it comes to fixing cars. And just by her just being so natural at fixing cars, well, that's kind of a gift. You know how many years it takes to be a car mechanic? Yeah, I know. Mechanics are often described and discriminated against being nicknamed grease monkeys. Okay, yes, the job is not exactly one of the cleanest, and the hours are long. But these guys have to go through a lot of training. Okay, maybe it's not like sitting in a big, comfortable office chair writing notes and filing taxes, and you come back in a pretty immaculate way as you walked in. No. Just because a mechanic's job is mostly working with your hands doesn't necessarily mean you're not using your head either. And for her to have the ability to just naturally know how to fix a car without really ever reading an instruction manual or taking any particular training, that is actually something you can rate as a genius. The action takes on a rather subtle exception for the ending, where the sky explodes into an array of bright colors and then brings it back together into its generic blue colors. And while Sheriff Ellis, played by David Straithairn, is in pursuit to track Ruth down, though it's not the intention of her being locked up. In fact, it seems like wherever she goes, it seems like he's pretty much almost omnipresent. Meaning the fact that she would be hiding out and Sheriff Ellis would be like right there. Almost getting the impression like, what took you so long? I was saving you a seat. Or she would go into another hiding and he's like, well, that didn't take long, now did it? It could be played off as subtle comedy, but actually it isn't. And like I said, his intention isn't to lock her up. It's because he kind of almost wanted to reveal some kind of deep secret of his own. Now, performance-wise, Gugu Mbatha-Raw is no stranger to the sci-fi fantasy genre, as she wowed the audiences with A Wrinkle in Time, where her father's departure to space is the primary story, making it her mission to search for him. Here, her performance is truly amazing, and her scenes pan quite nicely. From creating earthquakes due to her seizures, and breaking free after she was roped, and retreating to a hotel with a water payment that's more expensive than her room. And even though she has capabilities to cause natural disasters on her own, she is still vulnerable and has to hide from those out to get her. Like I said, just because you have superpowers or almost superhuman type powers to cause natural disasters doesn't necessarily mean that you're untouchable. I mean, she is fearing her life or whatever possible harm that could be done. Of course, she also has to deal not only with these government officials and top scientists who want to exploit her, but also she wants to try and get back on her terms, good terms, with the two people who mean most to her, namely her mother and her daughter. And that's also had turned out to be quite a lot more complex than maybe even she could have even imagined. If there was a weakness to Fast Color, it would be that though the intentions presented to make us think it's based on feminist ideologies with three generations of women who have amazing abilities to manipulate things with their superpowers. Hell, even Leela can levitate a bowl in the air via telekinesis and then transform the object into a barrage of dots. Sadly, this feminist delivery is not convincing in its feminist intentions, being that the men in this movie are still destined to have these desirable assets and want to bring down these women for the sake of that reason alone. Also, the backstory of Roth abandoning her mother, Bo, is not very well fleshed out because I didn't find her overbearing or overprotective at all. She just wants what's right for them. Knowing that even though these superpowers that they have might be a gift from heaven sent, doesn't necessarily mean they should be taken in vanity, nor should be exploited. Because unlike the superhero genres where you exploit your powers and it's accepted by the societal norms in those dimensions, here it has a much more reality based because the superpowers that these protagonists have, these three generations, well, it could be actually do them more harm than good. And that's kind of like what her mother is trying to point out to her. Trying to get some sense into that little head of hers. It's these small details that hold back what could have been a great story, which was demoted to a good story. I just kind of felt that the feminist elements, although were there and were put for good intentions, they could have been a little more better explanatory. I mean, subtlety is nice. I'm not saying anything against subtlety, but more fleshed out explanations could have been all the more sufficient. That's really all I'm saying. So overall, I would say it's a good story. Nothing spectacular. The performances were pretty good, especially from Gugu Mbatha-Raw. The other supporting players, I guess Lorraine Toussaint did a pretty good job in her performances, and Saniyya Sidney. I had really no problems with the acting. I really had no problems with the directing. Even though I think both of them were pretty almost just half baked, so to speak, and could have had a little more flesh into their intentions. But overall, I don't think it was that bad of a movie. I would highly recommend it. So therefore, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give Fast Color a 7 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Carrot Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.